Let's go over modeling a Star Wars Kylo lightsaber in 3D Studio Max. I'll talk about turbosmooth, using the layers manager, and duplicating small parts, and just general workflow. Um, so with an object like this, usually you'd start with a base and then detail areas over top. And I noticed with this type of thing in particular, a lot of cylinders and things that sort of little pieces that sort of go around the cylinder and attach to the surface of it. So for example, to do something like this, you can go to the create panel, just choose cylinder. I'm going to create a cylinder. If you don't like the default color, just assign standard material. And I'm going to right click and convert to editable poly. And what that does is it enables you to use things like chamfering, your knife, your cut tool, just to edit the geometry past just the standard primitive default settings. Let's go into wireframe, and actually let's do that one more time. And before creating that cylinder, and before turning to editable poly, what I usually do is take down the height segments, because you don't want to be working with extra geometry that you don't need. And usually I like to center it at the origin. It just makes things easier to work with, to duplicate. And when you're exporting the files to somewhere, it's better to always be working on the origin. So I'm going to open the Layer Explorer, and I find it's good to use the Layer Explorer to organize your parts, so you're not always having to select and hide things and not know what you're working on. So let's just hide this, and to create a new layer, just add new layer here, just call this test, and you can rename your object. So once you're satisfied with the amount of sides on it, you can use these parameters to adjust that. You wouldn't want to have too little or too much. You wouldn't want to have this many, because then you know that once you start editing it in edit poly mode, you have to work with all this extra geometry. So I think where it was before is pretty good. So now let's convert it to editable poly, and say for example, I wanted to add a turbo smooth to this. That's what would happen, and usually I'd bring the iterations up to 2, but that's not what we want. So what we need to do is chamfer it. So if we select the top face and the bottom face, and then I hold down Control on my keyboard and select edges, that changes the selection to edge selection, and then go to chamfer, and usually I'll click the settings on the chamfer so that I can adjust the amount. So let's just adjust it so that it's just a small chamfer. Okay, and you can also adjust the amount of cuts. So if you're finding that there's some unwanted pinching, like for example, oops, do this again, and like that. sometimes you'll find that there's some strange pinching going on, like say, let's chamfer this. You can also just click the chamfer button and then just part it manually. Yeah. So, you know, if you get stuff like that, one thing that you can do to sort of help that situation is when you do your chamfer, you'll do more cuts, so that'll add another line, and sometimes that will eliminate the problem. Another thing you can do is, for example, say let's chamfer this. Okay, and now you'll see that the turbosmooth will behave properly. Say you want to chamfer something else as well, make a hard edge. Like that, let's say. That would be the right way to do it. But say, for example, you're doing a chamfer and this happens, and then you go to turbosmooth and you get this strange pinching going on in the geometry. All you have to do is just clean up this geometry. So you could do maybe a target weld it, so that you just, you know, you're not creating these, you know, this non-quad geometry, because otherwise it's going to make a triangle here without you knowing it and add, you know, just unneeded complexity. So let's go to target weld. Now when you smooth it, it's a little bit better, and if you find that didn't work, then you could go ahead and do something like this. Oops. Make another cut here. Delete that edge. Something like that. And, you know, so that would help clean it up as well. So it's a matter of just, you know, just trying to go into those edges and seeing the complexity that's happening and trying to simplify it. Okay. So another scenario is, while making the Kylo, is you might find that we need to have pieces that are duplicated and go around an object. So in order to do that, let's select a face, go to local transformation, local transform, hold down shift, drag, clone to object, select the object, let's just extrude it, and before you duplicate an object you always want to add whatever detail that you need to add first. Like, for example, if you need to chamfer it, you know, I could select everything and chamfer it. Of course, that would add unneeded chamfers here. Since this is an open area, I don't need to add a chamfer there. So let's just deselect those edges and chamfer these. Now when I put turbosmooth on, you don't have the ugly hard edges. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you have long areas and stretches where that don't have any geometry, like say this face, long face here, and that face is, and it's on an object that has chamfered edges, then when you do put the turbosmooth on, you may get this kind of thing where you have a large space between these polygons in the middle, and then as it goes closer to the edges it gets smaller, and then you get a little bit of this inaccurate curvature, and sometimes some strange just unideal geometry when you put the turbosmooth on. So in that case, what I usually do is just do an edge loop, edge ring, and then connect. Ring, connect, and then I could chamfer that, and I could do that again, or I could make, for example, more chamfers. Okay. Then when I apply my turbosmooth, the geometry is more uniform. It knows what to do. Just behaves a bit better. Okay, so now let's put this. So now that since we've duplicated this face from this cylinder, and that cylinder was centered, this new object will have a pivot at the origin. So what I'll do is select the element of this object, bring it in a bit, and so you see that because I selected the element, the pivot hasn't changed. So we want to keep the pivot at the origin. And let's just adjust this a little bit. And so now what we can do is hold down Shift, rotate the object, so that makes a duplicate, let go, and then you can set however many number of copies you need to do. And if you set it to copy, that will make these all independent of each other. If you set it to say instance, for example, then you'll be able to change this one. It's better probably to use instance in this case, because then you can just change this one and every other one will be affected. So if I do this, then I don't have to worry about, oh, what if I want to go back and change this? I have to change every single one of these things. That's why it's good to keep them as instances and keep them as separate objects. And as you see, when something's an instance, then it becomes highlighted in bold in the Modify panel. Another thing you can do is, if you're having trouble spacing out these duplications, just right-click on Angle Snap, and you could set the amount of the angle in degrees, so that you can control how much there is a rotation when you duplicate. So for example, if I do angle snap of 10 degrees and I go to rotate, you can only rotate it in 10-degree snaps. So anyways, yeah, that's the gist of the Kylo, and it's just a matter of doing a lot of this kind of duplication and chamfering, and once you have your base done, then you add detail on top. And so that's the basics of modeling a Star Wars Kylo in 3D Studio Max. Thanks for listening.